with you a few words about Parshat Vayigash, about the personality of Yosef. There's so much to speak about Yosef. We already mentioned that Yosef HaTzadik did not become just a leader of his generation, but his personality and his energy, his power became something eternal to the degree that we cannot have, so to speak, the Geulah. Mashiach ben David is not going to come until we have a concept of Mashiach ben Yosef. We discussed briefly the power of Yosef HaTzadik to be the power to care. That even when he is on top of the world, even when he is in charge of the dungeon, he cares enough to see the change of mood, the change of the glow that people had, and says, Madua penechem ra'im hayom. And that really led to the entire Geulah. If you really trace back where the Geulah started, from Yosef being the viceroy and him coming out of the life sentence of the dungeon, really started from those 4 words of Madua penechem ra'im hayom. Why are you not looking the same as other days? Even though that he was the head of the dungeon, he could have been sipping beer, in the office, air conditioned down there. He cared enough to do it, and it's not something that he did once, but you see it before, as we mentioned, when the pasuk says, "V'chol asher hayu osim sham, hu haya oseh." Anything that they did in the dungeon, he was doing. Rashi understands, based on the simple understanding, that he was calling the shots, he was making the decisions, he was the head of the dungeon. But Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh writes, mesmerizing insight, he writes that anything that they did there, Hu haya oseh, he was also doing it with them. Even though he didn't have to, he was in position of power, but he was noseh be'olim chavero. He took the mantle of the tzibur, whatever they were doing, the prisoners, he did it with them to show that he's in it with them. Imo anochi betzara, and that's using power to care. But I want to share with you a totally different element of Yosef. I remember as a kid, I loved reading stories, and it must have been 8 or 9. I read a book called Conte de Monte Cristo, right? Very famous, old novel about a fellow called Edmond Dantès, a person that was on a rising star. He was going to become a captain of a ship, and he was going to marry this wonderful woman, and he was going to become rich. And there was one person for anything that he wanted to become. There was another person that wanted it. There was one that wanted to become the captain of that very ship. There was another person that wanted to marry that woman, and someone else to take the position. And they plotted against him. That I think the Napoleon gave him a letter. I don't remember the details. And they basically had him sentenced to a life sentence to some far island prison that there was no coming out of there. And after several years, his cellmate, the next cell, was this priest that was digging a tunnel to get out, and by mistake got into his cell, and they became friends. He taught him a lot of things. He was a very literate person, a very sophisticated person. He taught him a lot of things about different elements of life, and made him a very sophisticated person. And then after 14 years, he was dying for whatever reason, and he gave him a map to a massive treasure in an island called Monte Cristo. And this guy got out and goes and finds the treasure, and now he's the richest man alive. And he knows how things work. He knows politics. He knows war. He's a very sophisticated person, and he plans and plots a genius way, really like a mind-boggling way, to get back at every one of the people that were against him, those 3, and plus another fellow, the prosecutor, that plotted against him also. And he kills all of them, not necessarily with his hands, but he has them commit suicide. A magnificent way of revenge. And when you're reading this, you're like, wow, this is like so sweet, the revenge and how he got back at them. And as a little kid, you wonder why you should not be reading the Goyish books, Then you grow up and you read the Humash, the story of Yosef, and you say, this is mamash, lavdil, a copy of that. The brothers plot against him. They want to kill him. Then they put him in cell. He's put into dungeon, a life sentence, and then he gets out. He gets out not with a map of a treasure, much bigger than that. He is the most powerful man alive. He's bigger, technically, practically speaking, he's greater than Pharaoh himself. He's on top of the top empire of the generation. And now, his brothers are there. And he could plot whatever he wants against them. He could do whatever he wants. He could take a revenge second to none. What does he do? What does he do? When he reveals himself finally in this week's parasha, he says, it's not me. It's all from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Atem chashavtem lera'ah. Yes, you. He was not a pushover. He wasn't a simpleton. He understood that they plotted and they wanted bad for him. He says, Atem chashavtem lera'ah. You wanted bad for me. Ha'elohim chashava letovah. Hashem had a different plan for me. He wanted to orchestrate this magnificent plan that I should come here, la'achayot amrav, to give sustenance to so many people, and to lay ground and platform for the galut of Mitzrayim in the best way possible. So yes, you wanted negativity, but Hashem overrides the plan of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what the Ramchal calls Hanhaga of Gilui Yichud, the underlining Hanhaga of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, slowly moving things towards perfection. That is something that overrides the little guy's plans. And how beautiful it is for a person to think like that about life. That yes, we have our plans. Yes, other people have plans for us, for good or for not good. But the realization that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there is a master plan behind everything, slowly moving things towards perfection of the world, and the tikkun of every individual's neshama and the tikkun klali of the world, that is something that's powerful. And it's empowering for a person to know that I'm not bound and chained by the plans and plots of other people. And the things that happen to me in my life are part of the bigger plan of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, moving towards the tikkun, moving towards the perfection of the world. You're empowered when you think like that. You feel like you could fly and you're not chained down to other people's little tiny and small plans. It's a paradigm shift when a person thinks about world, about life like that, realizing that Atem chashavtem lera'ah, maybe yes, other people, but Ha'elohim chashava letovah. What situation you get yourself into, or other people seemingly get you in, whether be it people close to you, family members, this, or people outside, the work, the job, the people, our peers, our colleagues, bosses, employees, all those. After we deal with them the way we deal with them, and we're supposed to deal with them logically and using our mind and brains and try to decide the best decisions. But after all of that is said and done, the realization that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is standing on top. Hinei Hashem umed alav. On top of the sulam, on top of that, sulam, again, we said before, it's gimatria of mammon, your finances. It's gimatria of kol, anything that your speech does and other people's speech does. And so, the indulgence, all the aspects of life, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is standing on top of that sulam. Hinei Hashem umed alav. And he says, I'm shmarticha, and I'm protecting you. Your life is not just a haphazard happenstance of different things happening, but each one of them fits into a puzzle in a magnificent way when you could zoom out. Oftentimes that's the problem. We're too much in, and we can't zoom out and see the bigger picture. But when someone is on top of the sulam, it says, if you would be up here, you would only see how this all makes sense. B'ezrat Hashem, you should have that perspective on life. Amen. Amen.